She texted me the address, the dates, and one line that should have been a warning. Don't worry about the room situation. I already handled it. I should have asked what that meant before I packed a bag. I did not. That is the whole reason this story exists. My name is Noah Bennett. I am 29. I fix small engines for a living out of a rented bay behind a hardware store in Asheville. And I have been best friends with Piper Coleman since the two of us were 9 years old, and she punched a kid in the mouth for calling my dog ugly. That is the kind of friendship it has always been. Loyal, loud, occasionally violent on my behalf. We had been through breakups, bad jobs, one truly disastrous camping trip, and about a decade of nothing ever crossing the line between us, at least not out loud. So when she called me on a Tuesday night and said her family was renting a lake house for a week and she wanted me there, I did not think twice. Piper's family had been doing this same trip every summer since we were kids, a big cedar-sided house on Lake Junaluska with a dock that sagged in the middle and a kitchen that always smelled like coffee and sunscreen. I had tagged along twice before, years ago, sleeping on a pull-out couch in the den while her brothers took the real bedrooms. It was never complicated. It was just Piper's family being loud and kind and mine for a week. You in? She asked. Obviously, I said. Who else is going to grill for your dad while he pretends he doesn't need the help? She laughed, that easy laugh I had heard 1,000 times, and told me to be ready Friday morning. I hung up and did not think about it again until I was loading a duffel bag into my truck 3 days later, still fully convinced this was going to be exactly like every other summer. It was not. We drove up together, 4 hours with the windows down and the radio doing more work than either of us wanted to admit. Piper had always been easy to be around, easier than almost anyone I knew. She had dark hair she never quite tamed, a habit of narrating billboards in a fake news anchor voice, and the kind of laugh that made strangers in gas stations turn and smile without knowing why. I had spent a long time not thinking too hard about any of that. It was safer that way. When we pulled up to the house, her parents were already on the porch, her mother waving both arms like we were arriving by ship. Her younger brother Cole was down at the dock, doing something loud and unnecessary to a kayak. It felt exactly like it always had, right up until Piper grabbed both our bags out of the truck bed and said, too casually, "So, quick thing." That sentence has never once been followed by a quick thing, I said. She didn't look at me. The house only has 3 bedrooms this year. Mom and Dad have one. Cole and his girlfriend have one, and Aunt Ruth is in the 3rd because her knees can't handle the loft stairs. I waited. So you and I are in the loft, she said. Together. 1 bed. I already checked. There's no way to fit a second one up there. The ceiling slants too much. I stood in the gravel driveway with a duffel bag digging into my shoulder and stared at her like she had just told me the lake had drained overnight. You couldn't have led with that? Would you have said no? I might have needed a minute. You've had 4 hours in a truck, she said. That was your minute. Then she turned and walked up the porch steps like she hadn't just detonated a small emotional bomb in the driveway, leaving me standing there trying to remember how to make my legs work like normal legs. Here is the thing about Piper Coleman. She does not rattle easily, and she does not usually spring things on people without a reason. So even as I stood there doing quiet math about how exactly a grown man and his best friend were supposed to share one bed for 7 nights without either of us combusting, some smaller, quieter part of me wondered if this had been less of a scheduling accident and more of a decision. I did not let myself sit with that thought. I picked up my bag and went inside. The loft turned out to be smaller than advertised. A slanted ceiling room tucked above the main house with 1 queen bed, 1 dresser, and a single window that looked out over the lake. It smelled like cedar and old sunscreen, the same as every other room in that house. And it had exactly the amount of space you would expect for 2 adults who had never had to negotiate personal space with each other before. "This is fine," Piper said, dropping her bag on one side of the bed like she was staking a claim. "We've slept in the same room before. Camping. That one road trip to Charleston. On different surfaces," I said. "That's the part you're skipping. Sleeping bags. Separate car seats. This is a shared mattress, Piper. I promise not to steal the blankets. You've stolen every blanket you've ever been within 10 feet of. It's basically your hobby." She threw a pillow at my head without even looking, already halfway out the door to go find her mother. And I stood there in that slanted little room, holding a pillow and trying to figure out when exactly my chest had started doing this thing every time she smiled at me sideways like that. The first night, we handled it with the kind of aggressive normalcy that only two people avoiding a conversation can produce. We built a wall of spare pillows straight down the middle of the mattress like a pair of teenagers at a sleepover, and we both pretended that was a reasonable adult solution to the problem. It worked mostly. I lay awake longer than I wanted to admit, listening to her breathing even out a few feet away, painfully aware of every inch of space between us and every reason I had spent a decade convincing myself not to notice. By the second day, the pillow wall had already started losing the war. Piper kicked half of it onto the floor sometime around 2 a.m. without waking up, and I lay there staring at the slanted ceiling, arguing with myself about whether putting it back would be sensible or insane. The days were easier than the nights. We spent them the way we always had, out on the dock with her brothers, taking turns badly water skiing behind Cole's boat, eating too much of her mother's cornbread, getting sunburned in the exact same uneven pattern we always did, because neither of us has ever once remembered to reapply sunscreen on time. Her family treated me the way they always had, like an extra son who happened to show up every summer. And for a few hours at a stretch, I could almost convince myself the sleeping arrangement was just logistics and nothing else. Then evening would come, and the two of us would climb those narrow loft stairs, and the whole day's easy normalcy would collapse into something quieter and harder to name. On the fourth night, a storm rolled in off the lake, the kind that rattled the windows and knocked the power out for a few hours. Piper's mother handed out candles like she was running a small evacuation, and by the time we made it back up to the loft, the room was lit by nothing but one half-melted candle on the dresser and the occasional flash of lightning through the window. "This is either romantic or a fire hazard," Piper said, climbing onto the bed. "I genuinely can't tell which. Statistically, probably both." She laughed, and for a second the sound of it against the thunder outside did something to me I was tired of pretending I didn't feel. We lay there in the candlelight, not talking for a while, the storm doing most of the work of filling the silence. And then she said, quiet enough that I almost missed it under the rain, "Can I tell you something, and you not make it weird? I make everything weird. It's my one skill. I'm serious, Noah." I turned my head toward her. In the candlelight, she looked younger somehow, less like the version of Piper who ran her own bakery and negotiated with vendors twice her age without blinking, and more like the girl who used to sneak out her window to sit on my roof and talk about nothing until midnight. "I didn't actually book this trip wrong," she said. "The room thing. I mean, the house really does only have 3 bedrooms. That part's true. But I could have asked my parents to take the couch downstairs and put you on the pull-out like always. I didn't ask. I did not say anything, mostly because I was fairly sure my voice would come out wrong if I tried. I wanted an excuse," she said, "to see what it felt like to be in a room with you and not have anywhere else to look." The rain kept going outside, steady and loud, and I lay there for a second doing the same quiet math I'd been doing since the driveway. Except this time the numbers finally added up to something simple. "You could have just told me that in the truck," I said. "Saved us 4 days of a pillow wall that you kept kicking onto the floor at 2 in the morning. I wasn't sure you'd want to hear it." "Piper, I have spent 10 years finding reasons to be in whatever room you're in. She went still next to me, the kind of still that meant she was actually listening instead of already forming her next joke. And when she finally spoke, her voice had lost all its usual armor. So this was a stupid plan. It was a great plan, I said. It was just about 6 years too late. She laughed again, but it was different this time, softer, and when she reached over and laced her fingers through mine in the dark, neither of us said anything else. We didn't need to. The storm eventually passed. The power came back sometime after midnight, and neither of us bothered getting up to turn off the lights we'd left on downstairs. The rest of the week changed in small, quiet ways that nobody in her family seemed to notice. Or maybe they noticed everything and were simply too polite or too amused to say so out loud. Cole started making comments at breakfast about how the loft had gotten suspiciously quiet at night compared to the first few days. Her mother just kept refilling my coffee without being asked, which I have since learned is her version of a blessing. On the last night, we sat out on the sagging dock with our feet in the water, the same dock we'd sat on as teenagers arguing about nothing, and Piper leaned her head on my shoulder like it was something we'd been doing for years instead of days. So what happens when we get home? She said. Back to 2 separate houses, 2 separate lives, pretending none of this happened. I don't want to pretend it didn't happen. Good, she said, because I already told my mom she needs to book a bigger place next summer. 2 rooms isn't going to cut it anymore, but I'm not asking for 2 rooms either. I looked over at her, lake water going dark and gold with the last of the sunset, and thought about every summer I had shown up at that house and slept on a pull-out couch without ever once letting myself imagine this. You planned that whole loft situation, I said. Didn't you? I told you. Quick thing. She smiled, unrepentant, and pulled her feet out of the water to lean fully into my side. Are you mad? I'm furious, I said. 10 years of missed opportunity because you were too chicken to just tell me you liked me. I like to think of it as strategic patience. You booked a lake house with 3 bedrooms on purpose. I absolutely did. We sat there until it was fully dark, the fireflies coming up off the water the way they always did. And for the first time in a decade of summers at that lake house, the trip home the next morning didn't feel like the end of something. It felt like the very beginning of it. Would you have caught on before the driveway? Or would Piper's little scheme have worked on you too? Tell me honestly in the comments. I actually read every single one. If this one hit for you, hit like, subscribe for more, and share it with someone who still hasn't told their best friend how they really feel. I'll see you in the next story.